We are staring down a global crisis of rapidly degrading soil and collapsing biodiversity. Scientists and governments are pouring billions into an anxious search for new, high-tech agricultural solutions to keep the planet fed. Long before European colonization, the Indian subcontinent operated as a pluriverse, a landscape of diverse, highly adaptive scientific systems that evolved through centuries of trial and error in specific local environments. Take the practice of jhum, found in the steep terraced valleys of northeast India. To an outsider trained in Western forestry, this practice, often called shifting cultivation, looks awful. It appears as though farmers are simply burning down ancient forests to clear land. Look closer, and a sophisticated ecological engine emerges. Farmers maintain a strict 12 to 25-year rotational cycle. They meticulously intercrop diverse plants, harvest the yield, and then leave the plot completely alone to let the deep-rooted forest regenerate. This chart shows exactly what happens underground over those 2 decades. When the land is left to rest, the soil thrives. Nitrogen, phosphorus, and organic matter steadily climb back up, reaching nearly 90% of primeval forest levels by the end of the cycle. So, if we have a proven, community-managed engine for repairing soil, why do modern policies actively criminalize it? To answer that, we have to look at a process called epistemicide. That is the systematic destruction, silencing, or devaluation of non-dominant knowledge systems. By intentionally outlawing native ways of interacting with the land, colonial powers established total control, discarding centuries of ecological expertise that we are only now starting to understand. The formal erasure of India's pluriverse gained massive momentum in 1835. British official Thomas Macaulay issued his Minute on Indian Education, deliberately cutting funding for traditional learning. He famously declared that a single shelf of a good European library was worth the entire native literature of India and Arabia. The strategy aimed to mediate colonial rule by creating a class of compliant, English-educated interpreters. To pull this off, British ethnologists actively framed Adivasi, or indigenous tribal communities, as primitive animists. By labeling their experiential knowledge as folk curiosities, Western positivism became the only accepted truth. Through a series of Indian Forest Acts passed between 1865 and 1927, the colonial government declared vast tracts of forest to be state property. This land grab directly targeted indigenous conservation systems like sacred groves or sarna. Before British rule, communities protected thousands of decentralized patches of forest. Enforced by strict spiritual taboos against commercial extraction, these groves functioned as highly effective genetic seed banks and biodiversity hotspots. Under the new forest laws, colonial administrators dismissed these groves as relics unfit for scientific management. They weaponized the concept of superstition to cancel customary rights, giving the state total control over the region's valuable timber. The law literally transformed expert ecological stewardship into a crime. By severing communities from their ancestral land, the state cut them off from their own laboratories and classrooms. This erasure boils down to a clash of core logics. Western colonialism operated on an extractive worldview, the idea that nature is an inert resource waiting to be mined for maximum commercial yield. The Adivasi operated on a relational logic, treating plants, animals, and soil as animate kin in a deeply interdependent system. We see the extractive approach clearly in the colonial indigo plantations of Bengal and Bihar. Traditional cultivators originally integrated indigo into sustainable, rotational agro-ecosystems. British rule replaced this with coercive monoculture plantations, prioritizing raw export tonnage over local ecological health and destroying the native soil. The new Nehruvian state that emerged after Indian independence in 1947 heavily promoted a scientific temper that continued to privilege Western technoscience. Modern development projects and the Green Revolution largely maintained the idea that indigenous farming and medicine were backwards. Epistemicide simply evolved. Today, it has shifted from outright legal destruction to intellectual theft, a practice known as biopiracy. Consider the Kani tribe in the Western Ghats of Kerala. For generations, their holistic medical traditions utilized a local plant, Arogya pacha, for its profound fatigue-reversing properties. In 1987, they shared this specific experiential knowledge with visiting scientists. Those scientists isolated the active compounds and patented a lucrative commercial tonic called Giovanni. While an initial benefit-sharing trust was set up, it was mismanaged. Today, companies profit under intellectual property regimes that favor Western innovation narratives, leaving the Connie elders who provided the foundational science in poverty. Whether it operates through 19th century forestry laws or 21st century patent regimes, the machinery extracts indigenous wisdom for global profit while actively erasing the people who generated it. Despite centuries of this systemic pressure, India's traditional knowledge systems did not vanish. They survived because indigenous communities continually put their bodies on the line to defend their ancestral forests from modern mining and deforestation. Reversing this erasure is an urgent, practical necessity for our collective survival on a warming planet. Integrating these lost sciences requires a different starting point. First, we must stop viewing indigenous practices as nostalgic folklore and begin treating them as valid, adaptive methods for climate resilience. Second, we need to achieve true epistemological integration. Modern policy must allow systems like Ayurveda to operate on their own holistic terms, treating the mind, body, and ecology as one unit, rather than isolating individual herbs to feed Western pharmaceutical pipelines. Third, we must actively support community-led sovereignty. You cannot protect Adivasi knowledge without protecting Adivasi land rights. Legal power must be returned to local assemblies, giving the people who actually live in these ecosystems the authority to govern them. All of this builds toward a concept called cognitive sovereignty. This is the political and cultural right of a community to define, protect, and apply its own unique ways of understanding the world, entirely free from the need for Western validation. To engineer the resilient, sustainable solutions we need for tomorrow, we don't necessarily have to invent a miraculous new technology. We simply need the humility and the courage to listen to the voices and systems we spent the last 2 centuries trying to destroy.